Have you ever been invisible in your own family? Not because anyone forgot you, but because someone decided you weren't worth seeing. If that's ever happened to you, I want you to hit that like button and leave me a comment. Because what I'm about to tell you happened at my granddaughter's wedding, and I still think about it every single time I drive past that church on Riverside. My name is Harold. I'm 72 years old. I live outside of Orangeville, Ontario, about an hour northwest of Toronto. I've lived on the same piece of land for 34 years. Before that, I worked trades, plumbing and pipe fitting, mostly industrial, some residential. I started my own outfit when I was 38 with one van, one helper, and a line of credit I probably shouldn't have qualified for. I don't talk about the business much. Never have. My wife used to say I could spend 45 minutes telling someone everything about a pipe fitting, and never once mention that I owned the company that made it. She meant it as a joke. I think. She passed 6 years ago. Breast cancer. Caught late. I still reach for the phone to call her sometimes, which is the kind of thing that doesn't go away. My son, my only child, is a good man. He works in financial planning up in Barrie. He married his wife about 15 years ago, and they have 2 kids, my granddaughter Zoe and her younger brother. Zoe just turned 26 this past spring. She's sharp, funny, the kind of person who remembers what you said 3 conversations ago and holds you to it. She got engaged to a young man I'll call her fiancé. His name is Fletcher, about 18 months before the wedding. I liked Fletcher fine, quiet, polite, studied engineering at Queen's. He always shook my hand when he saw me and looked me in the eye, which I noticed because not everyone does that anymore. His family is from Oakville. His father, I'll call him Fletcher's father, runs some kind of consulting firm. His mother is involved in charity work, the kind that comes with gala tickets and a spot in the Oakville Beaver Society pages. I don't say that to be mean, it's just what it was. The wedding was in June, a Saturday. The ceremony was at a stone Anglican church just outside of Orangeville. The reception at a vineyard venue about 20 minutes away. Zoe had planned most of it herself. Very organized, very her. She'd asked me to give a short reading during the ceremony, which meant more to me than I probably let on. I drove myself. My son had offered to pick me up, but I told him not to bother. It's 15 minutes, and I know the road. I was wearing the suit I'd bought for my wife's funeral and had dry cleaned twice since. Dark charcoal, white shirt, no tie because I can never get them straight anymore. I probably look like what I am, a retired tradesman who cleaned up reasonably well. Fletcher's family was already at the church when I arrived. His parents, 2 aunts and their husbands, a grandmother in a wheelchair. His father was wearing what I can only describe as a suit that announces itself when it walks into a room. His mother had on something ivory with a fascinator. They were speaking to the wedding coordinator in the way people do when they're used to speaking to coordinators. Zoe spotted me from across the foyer and came over immediately, which is just who she is. She hugged me for a long time. She said, "Grandpa, you look great." I told her she was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen, which was true. Then she took my arm and walked me over to introduce me to Fletcher's parents. "This is my grandfather," she said. "He basically raised Dad when Grandma got sick the first time." Fletcher's father shook my hand. Firm grip. His eyes moved over my suit quickly in a way he probably didn't think I noticed. "Lovely," he said. "What do you do?" "Retired," I said. "From?" "Trades," I said. "From?" "Trades," I said. "Plumbing, mostly." His mother smiled the way you smile when someone tells you something that doesn't interest you but you're too polite to say so. "How lovely that you could make the drive," she said. "Where are you coming from?" "Orangeville," I said. "Oh," she said. "That's yes." Quaint. And that was it. They turned back to the coordinator. Not rudely exactly, just completely, like I'd been ticked off a list. I've found my seat. I read my passage from Corinthians during the ceremony and kept my voice steady. Zoe cried a little. Fletcher's grandmother in the wheelchair reached over and patted my arm when I sat back down. She said, "That was beautiful, dear." I liked her. The reception was where it got interesting. The vineyard venue was about 40 minutes from the church. The shuttle added time, and by the time everyone had settled in, found their tables, and gotten through the cocktail hour, the light outside had gone that particular gold that only happens in Ontario in June. Long shadows across the lawn, the kind of evening my wife used to photograph obsessively. I was seated at a table with my son and his wife, two of Zoe's university friends and their partners, and this is where things shifted. A man named Thaddeus Wren. Thaddeus was in his mid-50s, compact, careful in the way he moved, the kind of man who listens more than he talks. He'd been introduced to me only as a friend of Fletcher's family. He shook my hand and said he was from the Brampton area, and we talked about the drive out and the weather and the kind of nothing you talk about in the first 10 minutes of a wedding dinner. At some point, Fletcher's father came to our table to greet people. He put his hand on Thaddeus's shoulder and said, "Good of you to make it out." Then he looked at me and said, pleasantly enough, "And you're the grandfather. Harold, was it? The plumber." The way he said it wasn't cruel. It was something worse. It was dismissive, not an insult delivered. An insult assumed. The kind that doesn't bother to raise its voice because it doesn't think you're listening. "That's right," I said. He nodded, moved on. Thaddeus looked at me for a moment. He had the expression of a man who'd just seen something he recognized. We went back to talking. Dinner service started. The speeches were good. My son was funny and honest in a way that made Zoe cry again, in the good way. I watched her at the head table with Fletcher and thought, she's going to be all right. She's always been all right. I just like being there to see it. It was during the dessert course that Thaddeus set down his fork and said, quietly, "Can I ask, are you the Harold Wiseman from Wiseman Industrial?" I looked at him. "I am," I said. He sat back. "I spent 3 years trying to get a meeting with your procurement team," he said. He laughed, just slightly. "We did a retrofit on the Brampton facility, maybe 2016. The site manager kept saying the owner would come by and never did. I was in Kelowna that spring," I said. "My wife was doing a treatment." He nodded slowly. "I'm sorry," he said. "About your wife. Thank you." He looked across the room to where Fletcher's father was holding court at the head family table. Then he looked back at me. He didn't say anything for a moment. "I should tell you," he said, "that I'm a commercial real estate broker, and that the building those people," he tilted his head almost imperceptibly toward Fletcher's father's table, "have been trying to acquire on the lakeshore for the past 8 months, is currently in a conditional offer with a numbered company." I sipped my coffee. "The numbered company," he continued, "belongs to a holding group that I'm fairly certain traces back to Wiseman Industrial's property division." I looked at him. He looked at me. "I don't get involved in that side of things directly anymore," I said, "but you're probably not wrong." He smiled, just slightly. I thought I recognized the name. I want to say it was a dramatic moment. It wasn't, really. It was just 2 men at a wedding table, talking quietly while someone's uncle attempted the Macarena on the dance floor nearby. But something settled in the air between us that I haven't quite forgotten. After dessert, I went out to the terrace for some air. It was cooler now, that blue-gray evening light that comes right before dark. I was standing there alone when Fletcher's mother appeared beside me. I think she'd had a few glasses of wine. She was friendlier than she'd been at the church. "It's a wonderful wedding," she said. "It is," I agreed. "Zoe is she's so sweet. Not what we expected for Fletcher, to be honest. We worried a little, you know how it is. She's so practical." She said the word the way you describe a reliable car. "But Fletcher just adores her, so." "She's the best person I know," I said, "outside of her father." She smiled politely. "And do you have family nearby? Other children?" "Just my son," I said. "And you said retired. What did you say, plumbing?" "That's right." She nodded with the careful benevolence of someone doing community outreach. "It's so important, those trades. We never think about what goes into buildings until something goes wrong." She laughed a little. Fletcher's father was saying, "It's hard to find good people for that kind of work." I let that sit in the air. "It can be," I said. She patted my arm once and went back inside. I stood there a little longer. The vineyard stretched out dark beyond the lights. Somewhere in the building behind me, the DJ had switched to something slow, and I could hear people moving toward the floor. I thought about my wife. I thought about the winter I worked 3 jobs to keep the business from going under, and she packed lunches for the crew because we couldn't afford to keep them on full wages. I thought about the morning I signed the papers on the Brampton facility and called her from the parking lot of the lawyer's office, and she said, "Harold, Harold." I always knew. I thought about what it means to build something slowly, over a long time, without ever once needing anyone to know about it. I went back inside. The next morning, my son called me before I'd finished my first coffee. "Dad," he said, "did something happen last night? Fletcher called Zoe this morning, and apparently his father is. There's something about a property deal. He's very upset." "Is Zoe upset?" I asked. "No, she doesn't really understand it. She said Fletcher's father kept asking her questions about our family, and she didn't know what he was talking about." "Tell her not to worry," I said. "Dad, I'm serious. Tell her it has nothing to do with her and Fletcher, and it will work itself out." There was a pause. My son has known me for 46 years. He knows when I'm telling him what he needs to know, and when I'm telling him everything. "Okay," he said finally. "Are you coming for Sunday dinner next week?" "I'll bring the butter tarts," I said. Here's what happened, to the extent that I understand it. The building on the lakeshore, a mixed-use commercial property in a part of Mississauga that's been developing for several years, had been under negotiation between a numbered company in my holding portfolio and a group that included Fletcher's father's consulting firm as a minority stakeholder. It was being managed entirely by the property management side of my business, which I stepped back from running directly about 4 years ago. I don't attend the meetings. I sign the documents I'm asked to sign, and I read the quarterly reports. The conditional offer had been proceeding normally until the week after the wedding, when apparently the numbered company's representative requested a meeting to reassess terms. I found out about this through my property manager, a very competent woman who'd been with the business 12 years, who called to update me as she always did. "Did you want to change your position?" she asked. "No," I said. "Just make sure the process is fair and that the terms reflect current market." "Of course," she said. I don't know exactly what was said in that meeting. I know that Fletcher's father's group did not get the terms they'd hoped for. I know that within 2 weeks of the wedding, Fletcher called my granddaughter and asked if she knew anything about her grandfather's business interests. I know that Zoe apparently said something to the effect of, "Why would I? He never talks about it. He's my grandpa. He makes really good butter tarts, and he taught me to drive in the Zeller's parking lot." That, I think, is one of the finest things anyone has ever said about me. Zoe called me herself about a week after that. She drove out to Orangeville on a Wednesday afternoon, sat down at my kitchen table, and said, "Grandpa, am I going to find out you're secretly rich?" I got up and made tea. "Define rich," I said. She looked at me for a long moment. "Fletcher's dad is furious about something, and I can't get a straight answer, and your name keeps coming up." I sat back down. I thought about the right way to say it. "When I was 38, I said, I started a plumbing company with 1 van and a line of credit. I worked it for 22 years. Then I sold the service division and kept the property assets. I'm not going to give you numbers because they're no one's business, but you're old enough to know that things worked out." She was quiet for a while. Outside, the June light was doing that late afternoon thing through the kitchen window. "Why didn't you ever say anything?" she said. "What was there to say?" I said. "I'm your grandpa. You needed me to be your grandpa." She reached across the table and put her hand over mine. She didn't say anything for a while. Then she said, "Fletcher's dad called you a plumber, like it was something small." "I know," I said. "And you just let him." "I did," I said. She squeezed my hand. "Okay," she said. She nodded slowly, like she was working something out. Okay. She stayed for dinner. I made chicken and potatoes. She called Fletcher from my driveway before she left. And I don't know exactly what she said, but when she came back in to get her jacket, she looked like herself again. That particular steady-eyed version of herself that she gets when she's made a decision. Fletcher thinks his dad owes you an apology, she said. Fletcher doesn't owe me anything, I said. Neither does his father. People make assumptions. That's their business. She hugged me at the door, long enough that I had to clear my throat. I love you, Grandpa, she said. Drive safe, I said. Fletcher's father never apologized directly. He did, apparently, go rather quiet on the subject. The property deal concluded several months later on terms that were standard for the market. No one was cheated. No one was punished. That's not really what any of it was about. What it was about, I think, and I've had some time to think about it, is something that man in the suit said to himself when he saw me in that church foyer. He made a quick calculation. He looked at the charcoal suit and the missing tie and the word plumber, and he decided I was a footnote, something to be polite to for the duration of a weekend and not considered again. And for most of the weekend, I let him. Not because I was afraid of him, not because I didn't notice, but because Zoe's wedding was the most important day of the year, and I wasn't going to make it about myself, not for 1 second. My wife used to say, Harold, you have a gift for being underestimated. She said it like it was a superpower. Maybe she was right. Maybe there's something to be said for moving through the world quietly, without announcing yourself, and letting people show you exactly who they are before you decide what to do about it. I drove home from that vineyard at 11:30 at night, on a dark 2-lane highway I've driven 1,000 times. The fields on either side were just shapes in the dark. I had the radio on low, some old CBC program that was mostly talking. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even particularly satisfied. I was just a 72-year-old man who'd watched his granddaughter get married, read from Corinthians in a stone church, and eaten a decent piece of wedding cake. Some days, that's enough. Some days, it's everything. If someone has ever looked right through you because of what you do or what you wear or where you come from, I want to hear about it. Leave me a comment. And if you know someone who needs to be reminded that quiet people are watching, share this with them. Take care of yourselves. I'll see you in the next one. I've had a lot of time to sit with what happened at that vineyard in June. Long enough that I'm not sure I'm still angry, if I ever really was. What I feel now is something quieter. A kind of clarity, maybe. The kind you earn slowly, without meaning to. Here's what I keep coming back to. Fletcher's father didn't do anything unusual. He looked at me and made a calculation, fast and automatic, the way people do. Charcoal suit. No tie. Retired plumber. He filed me away in about 4 seconds and moved on. I've seen that look before. I've seen it on job sites when I showed up in my work truck and the general contractor assumed I was the helper. I've seen it at bank meetings before the numbers were on the table. You get used to it, or you learn something from it, and those aren't always the same thing. What I learned, and it took me most of my working life to really understand this, is that how you carry yourself when no one is watching is the whole thing. Not a piece of it. The whole thing. I didn't build Wiseman Industrial by impressing people at parties. I built it by showing up on time in January when the ground was frozen, by honoring my word to suppliers when cash was tight, by treating the apprentices on my crew the same way I treated the engineers on the other side of the table. Not because it was strategic. Because that's what you do. That's the only version of integrity that actually counts, the kind that doesn't adjust itself based on who's in the room. Fletcher's father adjusted. That's the thing. He decided who I was before he knew anything about me, and then he acted on that decision. And the cost of that, not to me, but to him, was real. Not because I arranged it, not because I made a phone call or pulled a lever, but because when you treat people as footnotes, you eventually find out they were the chapter you needed to read. Zoe sat at my kitchen table and asked me why I never said anything. It's a fair question. The honest answer is, there was nothing to say. My wife and I raised our son in a house where you showed people what you were made of, You didn't announce it. You did the work. You kept your word. You stayed. That philosophy doesn't come from any book or tradition. It comes from watching what actually holds up over time and what doesn't. Noise doesn't hold up. Pretension doesn't hold up. What holds up is showing up again and again in the ordinary moments no one applauds. I think about the young people I hired over the years who came in with a lot of noise and left quietly when things got hard. And I think about the ones who came in quiet and stayed through everything, who are still running parts of that company today. There's a pattern there, not a rule, but a pattern. The ones who needed to be seen were often the ones with the least to show. The ones who just worked. They built things that lasted. I'm not saying Fletcher's father is a bad man. I genuinely don't know enough about him to say that. What I'm saying is that the habit of measuring people by their surface is a habit that costs you. Maybe not today. Maybe not in a way you can trace directly. But eventually, the calculation catches up. Zoe squeezed my hand across that kitchen table and said, "You let him." She wasn't wrong. I let him make his assumption, and I let it stand. And I went and read Corinthians in a stone church, and watched my granddaughter get married and eat wedding cake. And I drove home on a dark highway feeling like myself. Entirely, quietly, like myself. That's the life I chose. I'd choose it again.